Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we're going to be talking about my Horseman Abyss run, the champions that I used, the path that I took, and basically what worked and what didn't work and what I would change if I had to do it again for the most part. So first things first, the champion team that I did bring in was She-Hulk, Corvus, Captain America Infinity War, Guillotine 2099 and Black Widow Clairvoyant. The path that I took I shall showcase in a second. So here we go. Here is the path, and the path I started out on path 3. So I chose to fight Darkhawk, Luke Cage, then I went down to Old Man Logan, which was an easy solo with Cap. Then I went to Havoc, which took a couple of revives for Guillotine 2099, Dormammu, Joe Fixit, Mordo, Venom the Duck, Howard the Duck, Hyperion, Champion, and Cyclops, Loki, Aegon, Invisible Woman, Cull Obsidian, and Collector. So that was the route I took, and it worked out quite well. Overall, I wasn't definitely unhappy with my run. Thought I could have definitely done it a bit cheaper if I kind of like took it a bit more serious or paid a bit more attention or had practiced a bit more. But all in all, we ended up using around 4,000 units plus a chunk of love juice potions that we had. I didn't really have much in stash before that, but yeah, I think it was 4,000 or just under 4,000 units plus the love juice potions, which probably accumulated for another 1,000 or 2 if I had to buy them. But if I were to buy them, I wouldn't have used as many of them, so you can't really accurately tell that. But basically, it was, yeah, around 4,000 units, more or less. And I could have shaved off probably another 1,000 in that. Now, the champions that worked great was She-Hulk, first and foremost, was phenomenal. She-Hulk did put in a lot of work in many different difficult fights. Absolutely loved her. And one of the kind of like best and most surprising fights was against Hyperion, where I managed to two-shot the Hyperion. I kind of had it in Black Widow Clairvoyant, and I thought she is going to do great, and in all fairness she might have, but I just decided to bring in She-Hulk, and that was working extremely well in that fight, especially once I realized that I don't really want to stop Hyperion's power gain, and I just want to get in my openings like in between the special attacks, and that let me use more heavy attacks, more medium attacks, less light attacks, and basically deal more damage per hit. And yeah, it was like an easy two-shot, and there were a couple of more interesting fights with She-Hulk. Captain America overall, probably to my surprise, turned out to be an absolute MVP. So I used Captain America for Darkhawk, did fantastic there. Soloed Old Man Logan with Captain America. I pretty much, or close to, soloed, or well, did well over, I don't know, 70-80% health in one go with Cap against Joe Fixit as well. That worked out extremely well. I used Cap against the champion boss, who also has heal active, so Cap did phenomenal there, and that was also almost a one-shot. And then I ended up using Captain America against Cyclops, and we did about 25% per go, so that was about 4 revives, I think, maybe 5. 4 revives, something like that. And against Loki as well, with class advantage and stuff like that, it turned out to be a quite good place for Cap to shine. So Cap was definitely the biggest surprise of the run, and he put in so much work just because of his heavy playstyle. The fights might not have been the quickest, but he was managing to deal a lot of damage per hit, which was like the main thing in Abyss. And with his block proficiency and glancing ability, he can take punishment for days, he can take hits and block for days, and yeah, it just worked great. It was fantastic. Captain was kind of like newfound gem there. And Corvus I used for Aegon fight, because that was a bit tricky one, because I had no ability accuracy, but if I put on Suicides, healed up Corvus, I still managed to deal a huge chunk of damage with Corvus glaive charges and just wait for them to refresh, basically. and go at it again. I ended up using Corvus against Invisible Woman. That took somewhere in between 5 to 10 rewires, but that fight's like really tricky for the most part. And Corvus did great, because Corvus can bypass the powers thing stun. You can do that if you have a debuff on opponent, so as long as you keep parrying the Invisible Woman, she has a debuff, you don't get stunned. And those huge bursts of attack were potent enough to remove the force field and deal significant damage to Invisible Woman. So that was working out extremely well as well. Well, not extremely well, not as well as Nick Fury does, but it still did the job and we managed to squeeze through the fight. So, and obviously Corvus was used also against Collector, which is a whole different conversation. I think Corvus is really great for Collector. I just think that fight is extremely annoying all in all in any case scenario, even with Aegon, but without Aegon it's made so much more annoying. But I think Corvus is probably one of the better options. And then we are left with Guillotine 2099 and Black Widow Clairvoyant. Now these two champions, I would honestly swap out both of them. Black Widow Clairvoyant, only fight where she ended up shining properly, for me at least, was the Cull Obsidian fight, which was a 2-shot because of the nullification and all that stuff. She did put in a really solid amount of work. I know Black Widow Clairvoyant is capable of one-shotting some opponents where they are immune, basically by spamming the heavy attacks and launching level 3, but that technique kind of didn't take to me too much, and I just normally, for most part, found either Cap or She-Hulk to be more enjoyable and relatively easy options. So I didn't end up using Black Widow Clairvoyant pretty much at all. I did some damage to Dormammu with her, and then I just went to She-Hulk, because She-Hulk destroyed that fight, and so on and so forth. So yeah, didn't use her a lot. Probably if I could or would have to redo the run, I wouldn't bring her in, and at the very worst case scenario, I would simply not bring in any Mystic and deal with Cull Obsidian fight normally. And other than that, that was not much need for her, I would say. And Guillotine 2099 did fine for Havoc, but other than that, she wasn't that great either, because once you build her, when you start with 0 combo meter, which you most of the time will, because you can't finish opponents with your level 3, so she really doesn't do that much damage by the time the enrage is over, at least as a rank 5 5-star, maybe as a rank 3 6-star. And also, obviously, if anything happens along the way, you make a mistake or something, then all your damage immediately goes away. She wasn't bad, but she just didn't seem to produce much of the results, and typically there was like a better option. So I would take away her as well, and then I would find something else for Havoc, and I would probably replace Black Widow Clairvoyant. I still love those champions. I still love Black Widow Clairvoyant, especially. I think Black Widow is absolutely fantastic, and as I know for a fact she can do good things in Abyss. It just wasn't for me, kind of thing. So the options to replace them, well, the main thing is that you should include a tech champion, so Captain America Infinity War can get the Petrified debuff. So if you have to bring in a tech champion, you can either probably take in Ghost, because Ghost should be capable of dealing decent amount of damage per hit, or I don't know, maybe Star-Lord or Warlock for Havoc, because I did like Warlock for Havoc quite a bit as well. Other than that, I'm not even too sure at the moment, but yeah, I wasn't the biggest fan of Guillotine. Oh, I have heard great things about Sentinel in Abyss though, so Sentinel is somebody I would definitely love to test out for myself in Abyss at some point, but yeah, I probably want to do that, even though Sentinel wouldn't really deal well with Havoc matchup. But I have heard that Hyperion does great on Havoc, so that is another definitely viable option there. But yeah, Guillotine and Black Widow Clairvoyant were not my kind of like favorite champions. I just didn't use or enjoy them as much, basically is what I'm trying to say. I would probably bring in Mr. Fantastic instead of Black Widow Clairvoyant, because Mr. Fantastic has that Stagger Nullify ability, plus Mr. Fantastic's pre-fight abilities could work really well with some other champions and some other matchups, and Mr. Fantastic can also reverse healing, so I think there would be quite few fights where I could make good use of Mr. Fantastic, and especially the fact that you have that She-Hulk synergy, where you could make She-Hulk do a lot more damage, and same as Captain America Infinity War. So if I ever end up redoing this run, I will definitely try and put Mr. Fantastic in there, because I think that should give you quite a nice damage boost to significantly impact your cost for the run. Because yeah, you can use Mr. Fantastic to reverse heal as well for the fights where it's needed. And then the Power Sting synergy with She-Hulk would also work on like your tech champion that you bring in per debuff, so that would be fantastic. And yeah, I think I'm kind of intrigued to do another run of Abyss. What do you guys think? Should I do it? I would replace Guillotine 2099 with Sentinel and Black Widow Clairvoyant with Mr. Fantastic. And then we can go back in and see how well or poorly we can do. I think that would be interesting. Maybe. Maybe after we are done with 6.4. Who knows? Anyways, overall thoughts and overall experience. Most of the fights are quite fine. The Dark Hawk went down solid in like 3-4 revives, but that's because I was messing up. I was still kind of warming up. Now I know She-Hulk is capable of one-shotting the Luke Cage, but again, that fight takes practice, which I hadn't done, so I ended up using more than 5 revives on Luke Cage till I got properly kind of like in the rhythm and used to that fight. So that fight isn't too horrible either. As I said, Old Man Logan was a relatively simple one-shot. Havoc wasn't too tricky. Dormammu wasn't too difficult either because he's an extra large champion and She-Hulk just destroyed the guy. Joe Fixit, I ended up cheesing with Captain America Infinity War. Just went in there, waited, or basically I'd let him heavy me till he got the healing ability, and then I just kept reversing the heal. Then we had Venom the Duck, which I also partially cheesed with Cap, which wasn't too bad. Howard the Duck was annoying, just ended up pushing through that with She-Hulk for the most part, if I remember. Hyperion and Champion both went by really quickly, those are easy fights. Cyclops, I end up using Cap for the lack of better options. It wasn't too bad either. No complaints there. I love that fight. I think it's an extremely interesting fight. Loki can be kind of annoying fight, but nothing too tricky. Aegon, none of your ability accuracy really works, so you need somebody that does a lot of damage naturally, but that's fine. And Invisible Woman is definitely a pain. Always have a plan for Invisible Woman, because that is a really tricky fight. It's a really, really tricky fight. And after that, Call Obsidian was easy cheese, and Collector is a nightmare. And now, that is the big problem. Is it Grandmaster or is it Collector there? I think it's Collector. What's the profile picture? Yeah, that's Collector. Yeah, that fight is nightmare. I hate it. There is no good way or great way of beating it, I think, for most part. It's annoying. It eats up a lot of resources. And the lower his health goes, the more he goes unstoppable. And then once you actually learn how to like play around, for the most part, then it's not too bad, but it was extremely frustrating. And that's the biggest, I think, downfall, because you can do Abyss relatively cheap without any of the Horsemen, but without Aegon, the Collector fight is just so much worse. And I can only imagine how bad that fight would have been if I didn't have Corvus, and my entire kind of like strategy wouldn't involve bringing in a big Corvus, boosting him up, getting his missions along the way, and then just going in for like quick amounts of burst damage, kind of like in the same fashion that Aegon does it. Without Corvus or Aegon, I feel that fight would have been an absolute cancer, and my experience there would have absolutely been destroyed. Now, luckily it wasn't, and it didn't. It was still annoying, but it was relatively reasonable cost. But yeah, if I didn't have Corvus, then I would have to rely on the rest of my champions, who quite often are ramp up champions or rely at least on some extended fight duration. that would definitely be extremely tricky fight. So that is my main point to take away. Make sure you have somebody decent for the boss. Do not forget the boss and think, oh, I'm just going to throw resource and revives at him, because you will end up throwing resource and revives at that collector anyways. But if you do not have a solid plan for the boss, there's going to be a huge amount of resource and revives, much more than you realize. And yeah, that is kind of like the biggest thing. Other than that, what I have understood is definitely the fact that you do not need these horsemen. Obviously, they do make some fights much easier. Some fights are actually easier with different champions, different options that you got if you play them right. But the main thing is to know what you're going to do when and how, kind of thing. So whenever you do go in Abyss, you do not need to think, I don't have Nick Fury, which champion will replace him? Or I don't have Human Torch, which champion will replace him? Because not a single champion will be able to replace any of those 4 horsemen single-handedly for all of the fights they work for. The reason why those 4 champions are so dominant in Abyss is because they work for so many different fights. When you're missing some of these horsemen, you need to see the fights that you would use those champions for and find a champion that can also tackle that fight as well, or sometimes even better than one of the 4 horsemen. And that is how you need to approach running Abyss. You need to physically take a look at map, take a look at the path that you're going to be doing, whether you're going to be doing path 1 or path 3 or whichever path you will be doing, or when you're 100%ing it, whichever path is next. You need to take a look at every single fight on that path and make sure that you have a champion to use. Use a pad, use a paper if you must, but basically make sure that you have a plan for every single fight. If possible, have a plan B of another champion that could possibly work that you want to bring in anyways. And that is the most important thing. The fact that you go in and you do not try to replace, I don't know, Aegon. You do look at the fights where you would use Aegon and you find a champion that can deal with those fights relatively well, or should do. And that is how you go in, and that is, at least I believe, what you should do if you are trying to get at least that initial completion of Abyss with a limited roster. And yeah, for most part, that will do for today. I did have relatively alright experience. Didn't take us too long either. I believe total stream time was about 8 hours. I did it in 2 streams, so not significantly longer than people who do it with Aegons, so on and so forth. And yeah, all in all, I think it's definitely doable. I think at least for the initial completion, you do not have to try and get all the horsemen. You can do it without any of the horsemen, so long as you have a plan. I don't think I performed some sort of incredible feat. I wasn't even playing that good, to be fair, in many of the fights. Some fights I did alright, and some fights I was just purely sloppy, and that wasted a lot of revives. But what I want to say by that is that it's not something that's incredibly skill intensive. You just need to be relatively consistent, and Abyss will be just fine for you. And yeah, if I can do it without the 4 horsemen, then I'm sure you guys can as well. And hopefully this video will serve as some sort of encouragement for at least some of you to go in and try if you are eager to do so. Last point is, obviously, if you do not have answers and options, and if your roster is definitely severely short, then wait. Do not rush in it without being prepared. But having the 4 horsemen does not necessarily mean being prepared, or not having those 4 horsemen characters does not necessarily mean that you cannot do it or you shouldn't do it. That's important, I think. But yeah, anyways, this will do for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button, hit that sub button, hit all the buttons, and stay notified for future videos. I'll see you guys soon.